Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Rachel Zerin here with a thought for Shabbat. This week we read Parashat Vaetchanan, and if there was ever a Torah portion to be nicknamed Judaism's greatest hits, this one would probably be it. It includes the Shema, the V'ahavta, the retelling of the Ten Commandments, along with many other statements that are deeply embedded in Jewish tradition. Like the majority of the book of Deuteronomy, this week's parasha is all told through the voice of Moses as part of his lengthy goodbye speech to the people of Israel. In this sense, this telling of the Ten Commandments differs from the first time that we read the Ten Commandments in the book of Exodus. There, in Exodus, we read the Ten Commandments as if they are being uttered by the voice of the divine. Here, we read the Ten Commandments as they are being told by Moses again to the people. Of course, there is also a difference of approximately 40 years between the telling in Exodus and the telling that we read this week. It is always interesting to note when we have a telling and a retelling, what is the same and what is different? And, my favorite question, what can we learn from those differences? To me, this really becomes powerful when we look at the fourth commandment about Shabbat. By and large, this commandment in Exodus and in Deuteronomy instruct us to do the same thing. 6 days shall you work, on the seventh day you shall rest. But the reason for this pattern of work and rest on the seventh day, is completely different. In the book of Exodus, we are told to rest because for 6 days God labored creating the world, and on the seventh day God rested. Just as the divine worked and rested, so too should we work and rest. Here in Deuteronomy, in this week's Torah portion, we read an entirely different rationale for Shabbat. Why should we rest 1 out of every 7 days of the week? Because we must remember that we were once slaves in Egypt and God liberated us from slavery. Therefore, should we observe Shabbat, because we are no longer slaves, because we now have control over our time and we can use it for rest and refocus and rejuvenation and for holy purposes. Why does it matter that these reasons are different? To me, this is an indication that the Torah speaks to us wherever and whenever we are. Perhaps it is even an indication that the divine speaks in ways that contain eternal truths, but resonate differently in the specifics in each and every generation. For the generation that stood at Mount Sinai, a generation that was only mere weeks from having been slaves themselves, they had no need to be reminded that they were once slaves in Egypt. They very well knew that. They needed to be reminded that their lives could be holy, that they could walk in the footsteps of the divine. For the generation 40 years later, on the brink of entering the land of Israel, they, however, did need that reminder that once they were slaves, that now they no longer are. And because of that, they can use their time to rest, rejuvenate, refocus. The same action, the same commandment, with two different reasons, resonating differently in different times and places. I find this to be a beautiful teaching for us in this moment as well, to think about what the eternal truths are that resonate with us, and in what ways do those eternal truths apply in our specific time and place. Do we need to think of Shabbat as a way of walking in the footsteps of the divine who created for 6 days and rested on the seventh? Do we need to think of Shabbat as an opportunity to remember that we are no longer slaves, that we have the right and responsibility to claim time for ourselves, for community, and for holy purposes? Perhaps do we need a different rationale entirely? The essence of Shabbat stays the same, 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. But that reason and that motivation changes. It may even change week to week or hour to hour. Whatever the reason is for you, I hope that you have a Shabbat Shalom, a Shabbat of rest, rejuvenation, and walking in the footsteps of the divine as a free person. Shabbat Shalom.